Welcome to the video. I just want to start off by thanking everyone who asked questions on my Instagram story as well as on my YouTube post there. Feels pretty awesome to be able to have a community of people ask me questions and then me provide some answer. I really like the connection and some of the discourse that'll hopefully come from this and just chatting. I'm going to kind of go back and forth between answering some questions and then doing some lifts and talking about my workout a little bit as well. So I hope that also is just fun and exciting for people to watch. And it just allows for a lot of learning, more than just the questions asked, but just get kind of a look into my training. So the first question is about the Olympic lifts. I believe it's just, what do I think of them? Yeah, thoughts on the Olympic lifts. So that's pretty broad and vague. So I'm just going to kind of interpret this in multiple ways. In general, yeah, they're cool. They're another lift. They're a lot of fun. I think it's really cool to kind of have that balance of strength, power, and then also just like skill and kind of finesse in a lift. I think they're tons of fun to do. And on the flip side of that, I think they're also very draining if you get way too caught up in them. But yeah, I think they're just an awesome lift all around, like the snatch and the clean and jerk. Just like any other lift though, I don't think they're necessarily special. I just think they're great. Now, my problems with them don't come from the lifts themselves, but from people teaching them and kind of the expectations they put around them. So people always compare older individuals, like people who are getting into the Olympic lifts, not from a very young age as a child, but later on in life, usually after their other sporting endeavors, and then just kind of getting into fitness. And they kind of crap on people's technique and expect to have this flawless, amazing, perfect technique. And if you're not doing it right, then you're doing it wrong. So you need to spend hours and hours working on technique because they're comparing themselves to Olympic athletes who have probably been in camps since like 8, 9 years old, doing the Olympic lifts multiple times a day, if not every day of the week, and training to be perfect with these lifts, doing them again and again and again. And then it kind of gets mixed up with coaching of people who are, just trying to get a little bit better at them as a hobby, get a little bit stronger, have some fun with them. And there's this strive for like absolute perfection and things need to look perfect. Otherwise it's a bad lift and it's not effective, when most of the people doing them aren't even planning on competing in the sport. They're just wanting to do it and get better at it. Then that just kind of creates this almost elitist and perfectionist idea around weightlifting, which hinders the sport and hinders the enjoyment of the lifts for people trying to get into it. It creates a big barrier, which is a problem. But if you just kind of take a step back and look at things aren't going to be perfect. They just need to be good enough. Then it's no problem to, add them in and just have them be good enough. I actually think CrossFit is great for this because it just gets people doing them. They're not worried about perfection with them. Some of the problems may arise with bad programming in general around it. But, if you go to a CrossFit gym or box, then with a good coach who understands good programming and progression, then all of those concerns go out the window. And it's just another lift. And these people can really coach the people under them really well and get them to progress, get them to try within their limits, and then push things every once in a while. And I think it's really fun. I'm going to do my set, and then after the set, I'm going to talk more about Olympic lifts for athletes, because I'm assuming this is probably more what the question was getting at, since that is kind of like the hot topic and the main discussion around it. And I'm just going to chalk up and hit my set. I'm going to take this little break in between reps to kind of talk about what I'm doing. Kind of playing around with clusters, basically just doing a single and then resting like 20, maybe 30 seconds, and then doing another single. Just breaking it up, pretty much going to volume equate it with the 4s that I was doing before, but this should allow me to hit faster reps, as well as potentially a little bit heavier reps than I was able to with the 4s. just going to kind of play around with it. I've played around with clusters in the past similar to this, but a little bit different, doing doubles and on a secondary day. So we'll see how it goes as the main work. But yeah, the goal with them is basically, I want each rep to be somewhat fast and crisp, and then hopefully that will translate into very fast and crisp heavy weights when my strength allows for it. And then who knows, I might continue this on as I get to the very heavy weights. But to kind of continue on with the Olympic lifts for athletes, they're still great. Do I think they're anything really special? No. You can kind of get pretty much the same thing out of other exercises. They do offer some somewhat unique benefits. I think Will Rattel really likes to talk about how the receiving of the weight is pretty unique to them. It's a little bit different than a squat jump. And then also like the timing with it all, the rhythm with it all, the coordination with it. They do offer things a little bit different than just doing something like a trap bar jump or jump squat. Now, with that being said, do you really need to do them if you're an athlete? No. But I think just because they are so widespread in the athletic population and so popular with trainers in that, because they are effective and efficient to get a good stimulus in, I think if you are an athlete and not doing them, then you're just going to pay later and have to do them later. Now, one argument that is really often made against them is that it's like, well, I'm not going to waste this time with these athletes because I only have 8 weeks with them. So I'm not going to waste this time with them to get them to learn the Olympic lifts. And I think this is just an extremely stupid argument because if you have athletes, they're usually pretty good movers. They're going to get after it and they're going to learn things pretty quick. And K.Speed made a good post on this, on Instagram, talking about how it doesn't take a lot to learn the Olympic lifts well enough in order to do them safely and get a training stimulus out of them. And honestly, it should. A lot of pretty good athletes will probably learn the Olympic lifts to that point in 1 to 3 sessions if you just program them well. So instead of, again, treating them like, okay, I need to make this person perfect at this movement and get them to, be crisp with it, be able to compete in a weightlifting competition, move like the Olympic weightlifters at the top of their sport, and you're going to bore your athletes out and waste a bunch of time by getting them on a dowel and doing dowel drills and then drills with just the bar, and they're only allowed to move up in weight if it's perfect, which I think is just terrible coaching for everyone and not the way that they should be taught in general. But especially with athletes, and you're just wasting time doing that. And that is, if that's your argument for not doing it and you think it's it needs that, then you just don't understand coaching the Olympic lifts. And that's where I really think it comes from, is just kind of an incompetence. That sounds kind of rude and mean. Not necessarily an incompetence. It's a lack of familiarity with the Olympic lifts and the lack of an ability to coach them, because maybe they haven't had as much exposure to it. And I think that's where it comes from. And then it just is this strong stance against it, when in reality, you can create complexes. You can have it as a thing on the side. It doesn't need to replace trap bar jumps for the first 4 weeks. You can be like, okay, at the end of the session, we're going to spend 15 minutes doing something with the Olympic lifts. We're going to do a snatch complex and then a clean and jerk complex, or just jerks or something like that. And you can make it really fun. And if you're coaching a bunch of athletes and kind of getting them to go against each other, they're going to be pushing each other and they're going to learn the lifts. It's not that hard to get a bar from hips to overhead or from hips to shoulders to overhead. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be snappy. It doesn't need to be crisp. It just needs to be good enough. And that barely takes any time to actually build up. I think that they are actually really easy to implement for athletes. You can do them as a warm-up when they're first learning. You can do them at the end, as part of a complex, right in the middle. You're still getting some training stimulus from it. It can actually break up the training, make it a little bit more fun and less monotonous. And then it gives you options later on. If you're okay, I have these athletes for a summer camp or a winter camp, depending on what sport, and you only have them for 8 weeks. It's well, you don't want to do necessarily the exact same thing for 8 weeks. That can get boring for the athletes too. You want to have some variation that you can do. Take that first 4 weeks just learning the Olympic lifts, and then in the next 4 weeks, it's now they can push those hard and try them out and try to get really big numbers with them. So I think that point just comes from a lack of skill with the movement and a lack of skill in teaching the movement, because it really does not take very long to get good enough. I think Austin Jochum is actually an amazing example of this, because if you watch him lift, he probably makes so many like Olympic weightlifting enthusiasts and coaches shit their pants and just like think he is the dumbest guy ever. And he's lifting weights that a lot of them can't. He did a snatch where he I don't know, it was like mid to high 200s and caught that thing at the bottom on his forehead, stood up and then push pressed it up. Yeah, it's not going to count in competition, but he's getting a great stimulus from it. He's still getting, that triple extension and working on his speed and power. It's like, maybe he's just not the best with the catch, whatever. He's still getting some benefits from that catch. It doesn't need to be pretty. It just needs to be good enough. And then the things that really do matter is the programming behind it. Okay, how are you progressing it? How are you making sure that the athletes are ready? And then, if you want them to actually learn it a little bit more efficiently, instead of getting them to spend a lot of time at the bar and being like, well, I'm going to take forever, use complexes that force them to do what you want to do. No feet, off blocks, hang, pull, hang pull, and then full snatch. There's a lot of things that you can do that create constraints and make it that these athletes will then just naturally do what you want to do. And I think that is really underutilized. And a lot of this comes from looking at the training of elite Olympic lifters who are in these camps. And it's like, yeah, they do their strength training, but then they also do an insane amount of technique work because because they're training multiple hours in a day. You take this average Joe who's looking at that, and then he's like, oh, I'm going to get into weightlifting, and weightlifters need to be absolutely perfect with their technique. And these weightlifters at the very top level spend so much time on technique and less time on strength because they have built up a lot of strength, and strength work, gets saturated at a certain point, so you can only do so much in a day, and then you can fill the rest with technique work. But they look at that and then just kind of compress those ratios down to their own training, and it's like 5% strength work and like 95% technique work. And it's just so wrong. And I think it relates really well with this point that Alec Glennis actually makes with endurance training, where he's talking about how people just getting into running just need to run pretty hard for a good amount and then light for a good amount. Like if you're starting off and you're only running 30 kilometers a week, you should probably be splitting that closer to 50-50 rather than 80-20. And it's the same thing with like the technique work and the strength work. Instead of being so focused on the technique work, you probably need a little bit more of a balance when you're just starting out, because you don't have that privilege of, having an insane amount of time in your day to just work on technique work because you've already saturated out your strength work. Surprise, it's 5 hours later. Some clients showed up to use the gym, so couldn't keep filming. And then I had some patients, so had a nice little break in the middle of my workout, but now I'm back to work out and finish the Q&A. Let's get to it. Before I get to it, doing some deep tier jumps or plyos like this is just so fun and good for warming up and getting used to squatting deep. I like going all ways a few times, and it's just fun. Also, I have the headband mic going because front squats and shirt mic doesn't really mix well, especially when I do Zerchers after. So we'll see if the volume's just way different. If it is, whoops. Anyways, I can't remember where I was at. I know I was ranting about coaches not really understanding Olympic lifts enough to coach them, and then thinking they need to be perfect and kind of holding athletes up to that standard. I think I made enough of a point on that. I hope those mouth noises were great. I think I've made enough of a point on that. And I kind of want to talk about then, what do I want to talk about now? I'm kind of losing my train of thought. So the coaches don't necessarily know how to coach the Olympic lifts without doing dowel, barbell, and just kind of being really strict with it. you just need your athletes to be good enough. And I think I made the point that, you know, athletic programs are going to be having Olympic lifts in it. So if you're not helping athletes learn that, even though you have 8 weeks with them, let's say they're younger and high school age, they're going to have to do them in college. And they're going to be absolutely floored if you don't expose them to them now. And even if they are college athletes already, you know, if they make it to the pro level, pros are going to be doing some sort of Olympic lifting. So it's the same thing. The earlier you get them onto it, the more beneficial it can be, and the more they'll get out of them. And it just gives them more options too. I'm making an odd lifts video, and I'm talking about movement variability and movement options. It's kind of the same thing with exercise options. You know, it allows them the freedom to keep training more exciting and less monotonous so they can do more and get more out of it. And who knows, maybe it helps some athlete become a freak, or maybe they just discover that the Olympic lifts are tons of fun, and then they end up competing in them one day and they do amazing with it. I mean, that could be said about anything that's a big what if, and that's, you don't need to bring what ifs in, but you're just doing a disservice to the athletes by not teaching them. So I personally think, there's a really long-winded way to say this. I personally think Olympic lifts are great, and that athletes should at least be doing them a little bit, and they'll benefit pretty much everyone. Also, since I'm doing front squats, I think this is a great time to talk about front rack. No one asked me about it in the comments, but I have had a couple clients and patients ask me about it. So now I'll have a video to send them, and future ones as well. So a lot of people, the front squat, common cue is elbows up. So everyone always thinks just driving the elbows up, and then they slam the bar into their throat and they're like, this is so uncomfortable. I'm choking myself and it's rolling down my shoulders. Front squats suck. Why would anyone do this? This exercise is terrible. It's not so much elbows up, more shoulders forward to create this shelf. Ideally, you should be able to hold a bar kind of like this and create that shelf so it sits more across your collarbone, almost. This puts it behind your front delt. So instead of it sitting on your front delt and easily rolling off, and then now you have tons of weight in your hands, it's now resting on your shoulder. That hand can be there, but be relaxed. Elbows up with it can still help, so you're not going down. It's an all right cue. It's just not amazing, and it needs more context with it. But yeah, more forward to create that shelf so the bar can sit on it, not just up. See the difference? Subtle, but it could save your life. The whole talk about the Olympic lifts in general segues really nice into this other question that I got, which was power cleans and adding them in, or power cleans and jumps and adding them into a powerlifting program. And that really comes down to, okay, like, what are your goals? Are you wanting to get better at the movement and just practice the skill over time? Are you trying to get a training stimulus out of it? Then you're going to program them a little bit differently. I don't know if I actually finished saying the question, but it's like, how would you go about putting them into a powerlifting program? You treat them like any other exercise. They can be a posterior chain exercise, just as much as an RDL, just as much as a hip thrust, just as much as like a lunge for getting your glutes. It's also getting quads, I know, just as much as a good morning, right? If you're proficient with them, and you're like, okay, you know what? After doing your main thing, that's the biggest thing, is just keep your main thing the main thing. So powerlifting is your main thing. Keep those movements as your first movements where you put your energy into, and then use the other movements to just kind of round things out, you know, target some things a little bit more. Maybe you're just trying to get a little bit more power and try to be more explosive and fast. Well, then when you're doing the power cleans, you know, more sets, less reps, like 1 or 2 reps. Make sure you're fast and snappy with them, and you're getting that stimulus of really quick on them. If you're like, you know what, I just want to kind of learn the skill, then you're probably going to go a little bit lighter with them. You don't need to go heavy and try to get a training stimulus out of them. You can really put them anywhere. They might work really well as a warm-up for your deadlifts then, right? And it's like, okay, I'm just going to do a few sets with this weight that I can move fairly easily. And then, now I'm feeling warm and I'm good. I've done that for 5 minutes. Then I can go on. Or just at the very end of the workout where it doesn't matter. And you're like, I'm tired. This isn't the best for motor learning, but whatever. If you're thinking long-term, it makes pretty much no difference. Then you can put them at the end of the workout and just kind of, do them and just kind of get a feel for them. It really depends what your goal is. And then understanding, it's just another exercise. So you can just program them just like anything else. You do your main thing first, and then you do some of them later. Taking into consideration when you have them in the exercise order, how tired you'll be, and that'll help with load selection with it, and then also kind of like goals. Myself, personally, when I have them in, which I'm going to be adding them in soon, I usually do them at the end of workouts because they're not a main goal. It's more like, okay, I'm getting my skill back up with this. So I choose something that is easy enough to move, but I still have to try a little bit. And that's kind of how I started at. And it's like, okay, I make sure these are crispy and I just get the movement pattern down and kind of remind my body what it feels like. Then once I'm like, okay, now I want to actually progress on these, I'll change up the order of one of my days. So instead of like having my hack deadlifts first on my third lower day, I put power cleans first, or usually power snatches and power cleans because I do both the Olympic lifts. And it's like, okay, now that is my main movement for that day because that is moving up the ranks in my priority of goals. So that's my main movement for the third day. And I can put more effort into those, start practicing those with heavier weights. And then I'm still building strength with everything else. That's one thing that is key for weightlifting that I've already kind of rambled on, but still building the strength with everything else. And then you're just kind of practicing the skill. And as for jumps, it's like the same thing. Are you just trying to get better at jumping? Well, maybe you don't need the most effort put into each jump. Or you're just trying to get like a smoother jump. Maybe you don't need the most effort in the jump and you're just kind of jumping for jumping's sake. Make them smooth, make them crisp, make them feel good, learn the movement pattern, treat them that way. And then when you're like, okay, now my goals are switching and I'm trying to jump as high as I can, you start moving that up the ranks. And you start doing it at the start of the workout, right? Building a lot of athleticism and power with it. Kind of like a lot of what Will Rattel does is he starts a lot of his workouts with jumps. Like 10 minutes and he goes, okay, I'm jumping in this way. And I'm just doing as many sets as I can in that 10 minutes, resting as long as I need to. That's a phenomenal way to do it. Gets you warm, gets you moving. Yeah, you'll have a little bit less energy for the lifts after that because you're putting effort into the jumps, but that's just regular programming. If you really want to also practice the powerlifting movements and get the skills for those, then on another day, you do the powerlifting movements first. At the end of the day, it's all stimulus and you're still stimulating the muscles and getting them stronger. So it doesn't really matter too much. It matters, okay, am I able to do this? Am I consistent with it? Or is it something I'm skipping? If it's something that you're skipping or just putting like absolutely no effort into, then you need to think, what are my goals? How can I shift my program around to best reflect those goals and give me the best opportunity to succeed at achieving those goals? So I know it's not really the most concrete answer and being like, yep, always do them after your deadlifts, because it really depends and it doesn't really matter too much. You just kind of do with whatever works for you and gets you to actually do them. As an example, my jumps right now, I superset them with my hack deadlift warm-ups on my third day. Those are my, I just do vertical jumps. Those are like my max effort kind of vertical jumps. And I'm jumping as high as I can a couple times in between each set of hack deadlifts. Then when I get to the working set, I've already done like 5 or 6 sets of jumps because I usually end up doing 1 or 2 in between each set of hack deadlifts as I'm working up. That's a really good way to kind of work them in too. Or, jumps are really easy to do anytime, anywhere. And this is another thing that I've done is I work out in the middle of the day because my schedule works around that. People don't come to see personal trainers and chiropractors right in the middle of the day, so I have no patients or clients usually in the middle of the afternoon most days, so I can work out then. And then after dinner, I'll go and do jumps. So it's really easy to just kind of throw them in because it's like, well, I can get a good jumping workout in like 10 minutes. Easy peasy. Anywhere, as long as I have room above my head. So don't overthink it. I feel like I'm just rambling and going on a tangent. Don't overthink it. And then, keep the main thing, and make sure that your program reflects your goals. I'm not doing these clusters like deadlifts, because then my workout would take 6 hours, because each set takes a longer time because I'm resting in between each rep. But if I get really good results with my deadlifts on those, then probably the next time around, I'll do my deadlifts as regular 4s and cluster my squats and see how my squats respond to that. Theoretically, they should respond great from a strength perspective. Right now, I just want thicker thighs. I need to build my quads up a little bit, gain that mass. So pushing these as multiple reps is good. These aren't like 0 to 1 RIR. I have a couple RIR in at least, especially depending on how many breaths I take at top. So at the top. Yeah, I feel like I rant a lot more in the evenings too. So have fun with the second half of this episode. It's going to be like a 4-hour video. The next question I had was yay or nay on warming up for accessories. And again, it depends, just like the answer to most things. So if the accessory is really similar to the main work, then you don't need to warm up. For example, when I do my regular bench, on my day 2s, I have like my faster, lighter bench, and then I do back off sets of close grip bench, 1 set. So I don't warm up for that 1 set at all. I just go right into it. Really similar movement. All those muscles are warmed up. Boom, just go. You'll do just fine. Now, when I go from my day 1 upper, where I'm doing my heavier bench, and then I go into heavier overhead press, I do a couple warm-up sets. So if the body's already warm, once you've kind of done the main work, obviously, you don't really need as many warm-up sets, and using a lot of similar muscles, you can kind of just like get into it. But I do think that having a couple reps of the movement you're about to do really helps switch it in your mind and just prime that movement to actually do it. So I'm saying I do a couple warm-up sets. Sometimes it's only 1 warm-up set, and these are 1, maybe 2 reps. So I finish my bench, I strip the bar down to 70, I zercher it up. Hopefully that's not shaking around too much. I zercher it up onto the rack, I unrack it, and I hit a single with 70. And then I go, okay, did that feel good? Yeah. I slap on my working weight and I get to it. Did that feel a little off? Yeah, okay. I go and I do another single of 70, maybe 2 reps after a bit of rest. And then at that point, I'm good. And it's like, okay, into it. Sometimes the mind just needs a little bit more priming. It's not like a warm up from a safety perspective or like, you need to warm up every single exercise. That's a huge waste of time. It's a brain priming thing, really, like motor pattern priming. Okay, I'm doing this movement now. I need to perform on this. Just off the top of my head, now I'm thinking of it, could probably also just like visualize it and get pretty similar effects just because now your brain's ready to do it. But now we're getting into all sports psych. Yeah. So accessories don't really need a lot of warm up. Now, if you're doing something like calf raises after doing squats, and the calf raise is your accessory, then you're probably going to want to warm that up. Yeah, you got some range of motion in the ankles, but you haven't really put much significant tension through your calf muscles and Achilles tendon. You want to at least expose it a little bit. It gives you an opportunity to test out how things are feeling. How's your strength today? If you have any aches or pains, how are those doing? And you can relate it to the 3 light zone. Check out my video, three light system. And then that can allow you to better select weights for that day, and just overall have a better session. But again, it's not a lot. Your body, the general temperature of your body is already warm. So you just need to do a couple sets to get ready for that movement. If it's something completely different, usually say like, yeah, do a couple sets with like 2 to 5 reps in a set. They shouldn't really be too difficult, but they should get you ready to do the movement. Then you can go into your working sets. Just like when I do my cable rows after deadlifts, I do 1 warm-up set. I do 3 reps per arm just as ritual, and that gets me feeling good. Allows me to kind of like stretch out my arms and see like, okay, how am I feeling? Do I need to sit here for a second to feel good? Am I feeling ready to just absolutely rip some crazy weight on that and I'm going to increase the weight a little bit? Or am I like, yep, I'm doing the same weight as I normally do? So it's just more of a really quick check-in rather than, okay, I need to prep for every movement. Otherwise, I'm going to blow myself up. Kind of a funny question next. What was I like in high school? And that was many lifetimes ago. So I can't really speak on it too much. I was pretty average in a lot of things, kind of awkward, but on the inside, very, very emo too. A lot of sadness and angst, and just, I spent a lot of it trying to just fit in and not really kind of, being me, which kind of sucks a little bit. Not too much ambition. I was pretty smart, so it allowed me to kind of breeze through school all right. That's the one thing I had going for me. Yeah, other than that, I don't know. My interests, a lot of it was hockey. I liked playing guitar with my friends, and I had a little like band we jammed, or that we did as a little jam session. Again, like, I didn't really practice guitar all that much back then, so it wasn't like really good. But it was fun. Played some video games. I was just a very average white teenager. I don't know what else to say. It was like, think of the average Canadian white teenager in the like late 2000s. And there you go. Now it's time for the good stuff. So I'm going to kind of combine these next 2 questions. First one's like, what do I find the optimal rep range for strength to be? And then the next question is how they see a lot of programs with 1 to 3 rep range for strength. And they are worried that if they work out in the 5 rep range, then they're missing out on strength gains. Optimal rep range for strength usually is, that like 1 to 3 rep range, working sufficiently hard, but not too hard. So, typically the best strength gains are seen with like, even as low as RP 5, then to like RP 8. And you still see really good gains with RP 9, 10. It just depends how often you're going that hard. Study limitations, they get people going there all the time. They miss the nuance of, okay, what if they just go there like every other week, every 3rd week, something like that. But yeah, as long as if you're staying in that 1 to 3 rep range, that's probably going to be best for strength. kind of comes down to learning the skill with a heavier weight as well. That gives you more practice kind of with the whole system center of mass changing, because a squat at 50% of your max rep or 50% of your 1RM compared to a squat at 100% of your 1RM has a very different center of mass. The weight on the bar is very different. It's going to affect things a lot. If you shift a little bit, how, like what muscles you need to kind of call upon and how hard they need to work in order to move that weight up. Even if you're taking that 50% to failure, the technique is still a little bit different. So to absolutely be as optimal as possible, you want to get some practice for that 1 to 3 rep range. Now, are you missing out on a lot if you just work in the 5 rep range? No. As long as you're going pretty hard, not quite to failure, but getting kind of close, you're going to be gaining a lot of strength just fine with that. And you're going to be probably gaining a little bit more muscle. The argument can be made long term, maybe that will benefit you more. The nuance comes down to, okay, like what else are you doing as your accessories? If you work your main lifts as the 1 to 3, look at them as practice and like gaining strength really specific to that skill, and then you build muscle with your accessories. Awesome, that's great, that's well-rounded. You could also do 5 reps with the main movements and gain a lot of muscle with those and gain some strength too. What rep range you use isn't going to make too crazy of a difference, but I will say if you're never doing singles, doubles, triples, then you're missing out on the practice with that skill. The nuance kind of comes down to, why do you want that strength? Is it to perform a 1 rep max? Then like everything I just said stands. If you're like, you know what, you just want to be strong for life and you don't care about 1 rep maxes, you don't care about testing, then what I said doesn't stand and it doesn't matter, because you're still building that strength. It's just that display of the raw strength and that practice with the 1RM, 2RM, 3RM, where you're getting those heavier weights that is going to change the skill of the movement, really kind of stands out. Now, 5 is still pretty close to 1 even. So it's not that much different. And the skill isn't that much different. So you're still getting some decent practice with that. So you don't have to worry about it too much. But I would look at adding in some lower rep ranges. Personally, for me, I find that with bench press especially, if I'm not practicing heavier singles like all the time, my bench suffers. And I can't hit those top weights. So getting kind of exposure to heavier singles often is good for me. Squats, I don't need that quite as much. I find kind of working in a little bit more of a rep range for myself personally works really well. And then deadlifts, I like pushing heavy. Really a combination for both squats and deadlifts is good. More so on the deadlifts. I'll hit some weeks where I go heavier and hit a single, because just the pressure and the feeling of the weight is a big difference. 10% change at my top end is a significant amount of absolute load. So it does feel quite different. Like when I was pulling 240 earlier today, that's not within 10% of my top end yet. So it feels a lot different than when I'm like, you know, pulling 260, pulling 270. So yeah, there's nuance to it. It depends again, but and find what each lift kind of works for you too. How much is it fatiguing you? Are you able to recover? How does it affect your other work? Does it matter that it affects your other work? If it's your main goal and you get really good outcomes by hitting a heavy deadlift every other week, but when you hit that heavy deadlift, the rest of the session has to be a little bit lighter, that's not necessarily a bad thing if that's your main goal and that's what gets you really good progress. So take all of that into consideration rather. Next question is if I have any experience hitting submaximal, like 1 to 3 rep PRs, 1 to 3 rep PRs using submaximal loads like 70% or lower? And the answer to that is kind of, but not in isolation. So I have some days where I have in the past used 70% on some days, actually as my third upper, but I was still pushing hard on day one and then hard on day two as well. And then just that third day, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to hit a lot of sets of 2 at 70%. So sort of it has its place as long as the intent's there. You can still get, a training stimulus and effect out of it. So, but just solely using that, I personally haven't. But again, if you're still putting that intent in, you're going to get strength gains. It's like the same as, sprinting, and then you take a high level sprinter and let's say they've never squatted before and you get them to squat, they're going to move some decent weight because those muscles are strong, because sure, they're moving a low maximal percentage, but they're moving it at maximal effort. So if you're using those light weights, you got to push it and you'll still get the stimulus on the muscles. So it's possible, yeah. But at a certain point, once you get to a certain amount of advanced, just using it in isolation isn't going to get you much further, because kind of like what I was talking about before, you need to practice that skill as well of, having the heavier weight. It's not the most optimal way, but it is possible. And I think it can be a good part of the program and still has its benefit, and it's still stimulating your muscles. And if you want to get into fiber types, there's some studies on it showing, moving fast can help those type 2X fibers as long as you're moving really fast. And who knows, maybe that has a good training benefit on it, but it's probably just best to use it in conjunction with other rep ranges as well, and just generally get stronger and not worry about these like super minute details as much. What's your goal? What do you want to accomplish? Make your training look like that a little bit, and just do it consistently again and again and again, and you'll get there. Oh, I just ripped ass and that just made it too funny. Anyways, that was an overshoot. Yeah, I need to go down. The long day is taking a toll on me. I'm gonna go back down to 140 so I can get better, crisper reps in, and then live to train another day. Just kidding, I really have to poop, so I'm gonna go do that, and then I'll see you back with core stuff, because those are the next questions. I decided to film this in case you guys thought that meant I was skipping these. That ain't gonna happen. Okay, I got a lot of questions about programming in rotational exercises, good rotational exercises that you can progress. And I'm going to focus on the core. Let me know if you guys also want meant lower body stuff. Some throwing would be good for that. Sprinting is pretty rotational, so get good at sprinting. Do sprinting with some turns in it too. All that's going to get you to rotate a little bit, and then throwing will help kind of work that too. Doing some unilateral stuff like lunges and stuff and landmine deadlifts, and emphasizing into that rotation can help too. Because part of my workout, I'm going to show you rotational stuff that's just focused more on just the core. And two really loadable exercises for that is that cable twist that Alec Blennis does. Really good, awesome, very loadable, very progressive, or very, very loadable, very kind of easy to get into. But my favorite is still the classic kind of Russian twist seated on the ground. I have a really good setup for it because I can put weights on the bench that I have and it weighs it down. I have it in a video, then you can just hold a weight and hold it out. If you're holding a 25 kilo out there, that is pretty tough. And then you can just keep increasing kind of the weight that you're holding out there to an extent. The loadability on that one, I guess, is a little bit more limited than the cable stack, but honestly, pretty hard to reach that limit in loading for it. So I think it still has a lot of utility, and then you can start stacking plates together. Comes down to grip a little bit, limiting there, but you should be able to hold 2 plates and they shouldn't be sliding out, especially if your core is that strong enough to do that. You've probably built up the grip strength. So I'll start off with the cable rotation. For this movement, having a couple giant balls to weigh you down really helps once you get to a certain weight. Take a nice, really wide stance, set up so that when you lean forward, your shoulder is kind of in line with the cable. You don't want it way ahead. You don't really want it way behind. Make the handle cooperate with you. If you're close enough to the machine and you want the max tension at the very end range, then you want it to be directly under the cable when you're turned like that. If you're like, you know what, that's okay to not have that tension there, and I'd rather get more tension through the mid-range because I can actually push the movement a little bit harder and get better work on my core, then step away from the cable machine a little bit. And then you pull it in and you twist. So that's the first exercise. I'm going to do the other side. I'm not going to film it because you'll just be looking at my butthole, but I'm going to do the other side. And like I said, it's really loadable. The tension on it does feel different than like the sitting twist with your feet locked down. That's why I like both, really, because they just kind of give a little bit of different stimulus. Another question was asking, how do I program it in? And again, it's just like anything else. It depends. I will say, your core is going to be getting a decent amount of work throughout the week with all your lifts. So you don't need tons. Just adding in 2 hard sets of each of the movements is going to be plenty. So like, going from extended to flexed, lateral bending, and then twisting. Lateral bending and twisting work a lot of the same muscles. So spread them out maybe. You could even spread all 3 out, and then you'll have to take a couple minutes. I personally like to just put them in at the end for most of my workouts. I do full range sit-ups though, and I usually superset those with my speed bench on my day 2 upper. So I just do my fast doubles, and then I hit a hard set of full range sit-ups. And then that usually only lasts for the first 2 sets because I only have 2 sets of the full range sit-ups. And then I have more sets than 2 of the bench press. But yeah, programming, everyone's always asking the questions. How do I program this in? How do I program this in? How do I program this in? It's just like any other exercise, nothing special. You should honestly be working hard on all of your exercises, and then the loading is what matters. And you just kind of put that into the context of the rest of your workout. And like I said earlier, what's your goal? Main thing? Get your main things done first. Okay, awesome, boom. Now after that, it's like, well, what do I really need to work on to help that main thing the most? You put that second. Okay, and then what is kind of out of those 3 the least important? Okay, boom, you put that later in the workout. If you're like, you know what, I want to work on my core and my abs, but I don't really need to, put that at the end. If you're like, okay, I keep skipping it and I need to actually do them, put them second. It all depends. Put it in somewhere, try it out. If it ruins you, then switch it around. For example, I was doing my full range sit-ups on my day 1 lower, and my day 2 upper suffered because then my abs were a little bit tight, and getting into position for bench because I'm arching just felt rough. And then doing the overhead press, same thing, because my abs were a little bit tight. So then I moved those onto my day 2 upper, and it was awesome. And it didn't really affect my day 3 lower. And then I moved my side bends to the end of my day 3 upper, and I noticed, hey, it doesn't even affect my day 3 lower. And then I can throw twists on that day. Now I'm getting everything in the week. Awesome, and I feel great. So just throw it in, try it out, and if it sucks, change it up. If it's great, awesome. But don't worry so much about how do I program this. All exercise is made up. I've done a rant on this. I think it's an absolutely phenomenal watch because it really changes how you think about exercise and really gets you to change how you think about each movement. And it stops you from putting everything into a little box and thinking, oh, I need to do this way, or I can only do this at this point. It doesn't matter. Everything's made up. Just do what works for you and what you want to do and play around with it. Don't get too caught up in this paralysis by analysis of like, oh, well, I need to do this to optimize this and this to optimize this. Just do before I get on this huge tired tangent rant. Just do. I got asked my thoughts on plyometrics, sprinting, jumping, things that, are athletic. And they are great. I actually do those things, especially in the summer. I'm up in Canada, so when it's winter, kind of tough to run outside. I don't have a track here. I don't really have the means and time to go to a track because, sprinting is not my main endeavor. But in the summer, I do sprints. They're really great, a lot of fun, and I do jumps here, and like I've already kind of said in this video, and some plyometrics, just some hopping. I actually like to get a lot of reps in when I'm getting my patients to do it. So if my patients are doing like single leg plyos or something, I'll do it with them. So, I'll go through a cone course with them, and I get reps in that way. So my plyometric training isn't too structured. Then I have some structured jumps and then some that I just do with my patients and clients because it makes it way more fun for everyone. And then I get some training. But they are awesome. They're a really good part of a good, well-rounded program. And I honestly think more people should do them. Even like, bodybuilders and powerlifters. It's good to have those skills to be able to do those things just from a living life standpoint. You want to be able to go out and play some sports with some friends or join a rec league and, actually be able to kind of compete and, have some fun and run around. You don't want to be so limited in your life. So even just from like, the Joe Blow standpoint of someone who just goes to work and then goes to the gym, get in some plyometrics, get in some running. It's really easy to get just some intro into it, just a low dose, like just some hopping here and there. Like I mentioned earlier, you can do a good jumping workout in 10 minutes. Same thing with plyometrics. Like you can do a decent plyometric workout in like 5-10 minutes at home after dinner, while you're watching TV in your living room. You can just do plyometrics on the spot, some lateral hops back and forth, like single leg even. And then even just like in the spot, like just whatever, depending on how big your space is, some bounding too, like do some jumps, do some hops, do whatever, kind of get it in. And you'll see pretty good gains from not a lot of input. And I think a lot of people should be doing them and a lot more people should be doing them. If you want more in depth on that, comment on this video. This was kind of thrown in at the end. So hopefully it's not too hidden for you, but yeah, comment if you need more in-depth answer on that. I would love to do this more often. So comment all your questions down below and I can compile them and then do another Q&A. Oh, and that actually brings me to a point that I want to make. And it's an extension of one of Angus Bradley's carousels or posts on Instagram where he was saying like, oh, clowning, like memeing on coaches who don't get their patients or clients rather to do plyometrics or jumps because they're too complex or like too advanced. And he's like, no, you just don't know how to coach them. Taking it a step further, you don't even need to know how to coach them. People self-limit. So you get someone to jump, they're only going to jump as high as they're comfortable landing. So that's just that. That's just that. And if they haven't jumped in ages, when they go to try to jump, they're barely going to move. Same thing with plyometrics. Like they're only going to go as hard and as fast as they're comfortable with. So if you just get people to try it, you don't even really need much structure. You just go, okay, you know what? Do a little bit here and there. Let's do a minute total of like jumping and hopping, and then you're good. And they're starting to learn. You don't even need to know progressions like, oh, start off with just some like pogos or whatever, and like go to your single leg hops and your broad jumps and everything. It's like, just get them to hop in the spot lightly, and they're only going to go as hard as they can. Get them to try to do a couple vertical jumps, and you're going to see, they don't want to jump that high because they're not comfortable jumping that high. They don't have the strength to jump that high, and then they don't have the strength to land from that height, so they're not comfortable with it. I get people over the age of 60. I've gotten people over the age of 80 to try to jump and do plyometrics. And you know what they start with? It's like not even leaving the ground. It's like, yep, they're still getting that stimulus. They're still getting that kind of like bounding effect, and they're working on it. And then after a few weeks of trying it, now all of a sudden they're kind of going like, and just leaving the ground. Awesome. You don't even need to have like a well thought out plan. It's just try a little bit and then keep it as that little bit and let them progress the intensity on their own, because they'll feel more comfortable with it, so they'll progress it. Anyways, that's a big rant that I want to add on to that post. I've also got some questions on ab exercises for the good old rectus abdominis, and for the twists also. I'm just going to link my ab video to it, and then you can see the twists in there. I'm getting tired, running out of time. I'll link that down below. It also has the full range sit-ups, which is really good to work your rectus abdominis as well. So I know there were some questions about just like those movements in general. That'll be there. Sorry I didn't get to it in this video. I can make another one and go a little bit more into depth. For this exercise I'm going to talk about in particular, got a question because they saw me do it with the Zercher grip behind my back. It's the barbell lean backs, and they just wanted something that is a little bit easier to load and progress. I'm just doing this off the ground because I have it from the ground from my Zerchers, but I also really like doing it off the safeties as well, because it's really easy to set up, and then easy if you're working closer to failure or feel off balance, you can just drop it right onto the safeties. So if you have a cage, safeties is great. If you feel comfortable working off the ground and dropping it on the ground, that's fine too. Really easy to bail out of. It is the barbell lean back, but just with a hand grip. Yeah, this can be a lot of extension right off the bat. So start light and start with a limited amount of range of motion, because you might feel it more in your back. And if you're like spinous processes are digging in together, pinching something, and it's uncomfortable because you're trying to slam the most range of motion possible, then you're going to have some back soreness that's not really muscle related, and it's just like you need to let that calm down. So this is one movement where I say, you don't need to push it that far in terms of the range of motion. You just want to feel it on the muscles that are working. And then as you can kind of like comfortably push it more, be really patient with it. And it's really easy to get good work in that range. But yeah, you're just leaning back. You're going to have to let your knees shoot forward a little bit just because of physics, so that you're not just falling backwards. But it's really simple. So the person that asked that basically just wanted a move for the abs that was opposite of the Jefferson curl, and that's really it. With lighter weight, I would have been able to better kind of extend at the shoulders first, and then really open up my torso and kind of really just kind of get some more spinal extension. That was a little bit heavy for the first set, so I was kind of more moving as a unit. But yeah, that's a good exercise for it. Again, starting out really light and easy with it is usually how I coach it. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you've made it this far, comment big brains, because this was an informative video. I yapped a lot and hopefully taught you some things, answering some questions. Hopefully got you to kind of think about some things a little bit differently, so that you can level up your own workouts. And maybe try out some new exercises. Anyways, have a good one. Thank you for watching. Now go out there and make some gains.